And welcome back. The recent wave of federal employee layoffs and mass deportations has created a ripple effect of uncertainty across several industries. With federal employees facing deferred resignation offers, probationary employee terminations, and ongoing legal challenges, significant confusion as well as economic strain has followed. At the same time, mass deportations are leaving industries who are dependent upon immigrant labor grappling with labor shortages as well as rising costs. Legal battles are continuing to unfold, and the effects on the workforce and the broader economy, they still remain far-reaching. Helping us further understand the full scope of these disruptions and their legal implications, we're joined by the founding partner at the Boyd Law Group, Patrick J. Boyd. And Patrick, good to have you. It took me a few minutes to unpack this and get this out because there's so much happening.
Yeah,
It literally and figuratively is a tongue twister. But talk to me about this from a legal perspective. Unprecedented in many sorts.
that's right. That's right. 2 days ago, President Trump hit his 50 days in office benchmark. We know President Kennedy was famous for his 100 days set of goals and accomplishments. And within those 50 days, it seems that there are probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 100,000 government workers with their jobs impacted, rendered insecure, or worse, all by virtue of a whole host of actions to decrease the size of, or even maybe claimed intention to decrease the existence of certain departments, including the Departments of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Defense. Recently, just yesterday and today, there was a lot of discussion about the Department of Education. And I think in this context, sort of in the social justice context, Darren, it's important to note that a lot of our government workers sort of made a trade. They decided oftentimes to accept less dollars for their jobs in exchange for the opportunity to work for and serve us as the people who live in this country, but also in exchange for maybe a greater stability in their jobs. That stability in government roles is something that seems to be impacted and being lost, and there's a lot of people nervous about it, and it's not all good, I suppose is the best way to put it.
Yeah. Let's unpack some numbers here. Department of Veteran Affairs, more than 1,000 employees with less than 2 years of service laid off. Now, when we look at people with less than 2 years of service, we always know the old adage, last one hired, first fired, but in this case, 1,000.
Yeah.
When we look at the numbers numbers of people being laid off, some are in that confusion because we understood that some were told to submit their resignation. Others then decided to turn around and say, no, I'm not going to resign. So give us a little breakdown as to where we are here, particularly when it comes to the Department of Veteran Affairs.
Yeah, well, it sort of it depends on the institution. With respect to some of the workers, they were given this opportunity to take a sort of a package to resign, right? And then it was later determined that that package or the pressure of that package was inappropriate. But some of them had already opted to take the package by the time the ruling came around. And there's really sort of three unique encumbrances or complications that make it not just the possibility that people are losing their jobs, but the uncertainty of it. One, some of the institutions being impacted are institutions that are established and are supposedly only being able to be disbanded by congressional action. So it's questionable as to whether President Trump can act the way he has with respect to certain entities like the Department of Education. Then two, certain entities have unions, and those unions have contracts and notice provisions that prohibit or at least require some meaningful notice and negotiation as to layoffs and terminations. And then finally, and Letitia James from New York is one of the important pillars of this, certain local attorneys general are taking action with respect to these terminations and layoffs for particular states, because when you're laying off government workers, that impacts the budget of the state. The budget has to be allowed to anticipate more unemployment, more benefits needed, the loss of services and the way to replace those services. So there's a lawsuit now challenging a lot of these actions based upon the notion that because it is actually the government surprising the government, that is the federal government surprising the state government isn't prepared, and there's laws that are supposed to allow that state government to be prepared.
Yeah.
So to your point, Darren, a lot of people are unsure, and a lot of people have surely lost their jobs and are unhappy.
Yeah. You spoke about New York State Attorney General Letitia James, her and Alvin Bragg, of two of 51 who've been across the country who've lost their state clearance as a result of Doge, Elon Musk, and following the president's directives. We'll continue to keep that and bring that up to you in another segment. But I do want to tackle this from a legal perspective right now. You talked about the courts and going into court. And whether or not there are jurisdictional rights, things of that nature. Talk to me about the process right now, because you talk about entering into court, those persons who have entered into a court fight and litigation against these layoffs. How long do we see this process taking place?
I think it's a great question without an easy answer, as most great questions are, right? I think that some of the determinations, like the determination as to whether or not it was appropriate to offer certain packages, are being overturned quickly. But I think the most of them, that is the vast majority of them, are going to take some time to unravel in the court system. Our judges work hard and they are bright, but often they are underpaid and often they are overwhelmed by the amount of work they have. So I think it's going to take some time for us to understand some of the ramifications. An interesting political point on that issue is something like the following. The Department of Education, which I think they announced about 1,300 layoffs recently, which is a big, it's 230 billion under the Department of Education, 1,300 people losing the position. What they did was they let people go, told them they were let go, and then told them that they couldn't return to the office.
Right.
So whether or not all of those terminations are lawful is one thing, but what is immediately the case is that people don't have their jobs and they don't have a place to go to work, and some of them can't even get their personal effects out. So the ultimate legality of this is unfortunately going to come potentially much later than the actual impact upon some of these dedicated government workers, and that instability is challenging. I do understand, and I think some people thinking about it do understand that there's an argument that goes from the administration's perspective that you have to be aggressive in order to combat the bureaucratic process. I think the unfortunate reality, though, is that just regular working men and women serving our country and the government are being stuck in the crosshairs of this political statement.
Yeah. I mean, you say aggressive, Patrick. I understand what aggressive means. I don't think aggressive means 5,400 probationary workers terminated. I don't think that,
Right.
and we're talking there the Department of Defense. We're talking about the Department of Homeland Security, 405 probationary workers terminated, including key FEMA personnel, CFO, program analysts, grant specialists. Not going to even mention, talk about air traffic controllers. We're not even going to talk about TSA. I mean, there literally is this shakeup amongst the federal government that is impacting Americans. But let's just boil down for a moment. Before we talk about the American population, let's talk about the individual. I mean, I just mentioned right here, we're talking about close to 10,000 people just right here. And for those of you that know anything about federal government, know anything about working in Washington, D.C., or been to Washington, D.C., you would understand that this is an literal emptying of the House.
That's right. That's right. Offices closed, physical plants being locked, including at the Department of Education, and people who had never been told they were doing anything other than a great job, being told on Monday, welcome, we're happy to have you here at work. Please keep up the good work. And on Tuesday, you don't have a job, don't come in. Good luck with your mortgage and your kids, your groceries, and those kinds of things.
Right. From a legal perspective, we understand a court overturns. President makes an executive order, court decides, hey, doesn't happen, it becomes overturned. What recourse does the president have after that executive order is overturned? Is it dead, done, away with? Or is there something that we are just kicking the can down the block a few minutes?
I think it's a good question. Again, without a particularly easy answer, he could revise an executive order to try to satisfy the standards. But I think the practical implication is, let's just think about it this way. If you're a talented worker for the Department of Education and you care about this mission and you care about what you're doing for the educational system of these United States, and you've been there 10 years and you had a job on Monday and you lost the job on Tuesday, if your opportunity to come back to work because the president's authority was improperly executed returns and you have a job to come back to maybe in 3 months, you may have gone ahead and found another job, and you may not be terribly interested in coming back. And as a result, this country will have lost a dedicated, hardworking, talented person. working for the government. So to your point, those personal lives are being impacted, but the lives of all of us who are served by these government workers are going to be impacted because we're going to lose talent for sure.
Yeah. We talked about people losing their jobs. I want to take it a step further. I was in the airport lounge the other day, sitting next to a gentleman who was talking to somebody about the work that's going on, that he's got going on. And he referred to the fact that he lost 2 or 3 people due to ICE and the mass deportations that are going on. And his response typically, was pretty straightforward. He's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I don't know how I'm going to make it. These guys were great, and I don't have anybody that I can depend on. And when we talk about these mass deportations, that's a microcosm of a macrocosm.
Yes, yes, absolutely true. The industries that seem to be most likely to be impacted, at least in our home state here of New York, are hospitality and construction, both obviously important industries for purposes of the growth and success and enjoyment of New Yorkers in the city. The challenging part, and you sort of have to unpack it. Historically, the law has always been tough on immigration. That is, there are laws on the books that say that people employing unlawful or undocumented workers, I should say, right? People employing them can be subjected to penalties up to, I think it's $3,000 per worker, and can even be charged with a crime for employing those workers. But traditionally speaking, those laws were put in place and enforced only in the sense that they were designed to make sure that people were complying with their obligations to try to gather documents and secure assurances as to the employability of their employees, right? Now the political announcements make it seem like there's going to be a far greater enforcement. And as a result, 2 things are happening. First, certain undocumented workers are choosing not to come to work, meaning that we don't have construction being done and we don't have the support and hospitality that we need. And second, business owners don't know what to do. They don't know what the law is. And frankly, when they call us asking, we represent several restaurants and industry, hospitality sort of businesses. They call and they say, what are we supposed to do? And our best answer is, we don't really know what the ramifications are. And I think that that's really the biggest challenge is the uncertainty does not help business, does not help people, and is not terribly great for the state of New York, I guess is the best way to put it.
I think you bring up a good point. If somebody's picked up, we don't know. They don't show up for a couple of days, don't know if they're coming back, don't know. A business owner is actually stuck. Do I keep this person on? Do I move on and replace? But that affects the lifeblood of the business, and a lot of people are really being affected in this, in this kind of way. This is something that pretty much, unless you're an immigration lawyer, if you're just that business owner, you're kind of stuck out there.
That's right. That's right. And you could have 20 or 30% of your workforce where you don't know if they're coming or not. So that makes it hard to do work tomorrow, right? But it makes it even harder to predict the possibility of doing work 6 months from now. Are you going to have the team to build those new houses, that new building, fix that pothole, whatever it is that you're doing, right? Are you going to have that team to host that wedding that you were supposed to host, or to provide support for that that confirmation party or bat mitzvah or whatever it happens to be, right? It makes it challenging when you have that percentage of your workforce. And I don't think anybody would dispute that a great deal of the businesses in New York and our great city here rely upon the labor of many people who are talented and hardworking, and none of whom are documented. It's just the truth.
Yeah. Talked to a top official working in the hotel industry, and they shared with us that a lot of workers that come and that we see in our hotels are actually here. They're here on doing service, and they do service, and then they go back home. But the reality is, there's a good chance that hotel service could possibly be interrupted with all of these mass deportations that are occurring. And the bottom line is the economic toll, because there's a huge economic toll that's going to be played out when all of this really breaks.
Right. That's exactly right. And a lot of people are scared, and a lot of people are hurting, and I don't know how that's ever good. But the hope is that there will be like Letitia James and other lawyers and zealous advocates pushing for the right outcomes and also just prompt outcomes so that we can all focus on how to continue to operate well and so we can have the optimism for success that's gonna keep us all keep everybody working, keep everybody happy, and keep everybody safe and healthy.
I kind of touched on this a little while ago, and you brought up the New York State Attorney General Letitia James. She, along with 19 other attorney generals, did file a lawsuit arguing that the administration violated labor laws by failing to provide advance notice. How do we see this playing out? Eddie, I know that's up to the judge, but how do we see this playing out in terms of time frame? And if there is this situation where, the judge rules in favor of the attorney general, I think you mentioned earlier, that doesn't mean that everybody's in the free and clear. That means that we can come back in another way and reshape an order in a different type way.
That's exactly right. As a matter of fact, the outcome seems to be, and there's multiple claims being adjudicated, but the outcome would seemingly be a determination that the requisite notice was not given. So as to that suit, the ultimate outcome would not be that people wouldn't be losing their jobs, but rather that there would be a delay and a transition for that loss of job. So at least in that context, it's just a delay of the implementation of the administration's goals, not a denial of the administration's ability to take that step. With something like the Department of Education, just as an example, the law is a little bit more difficult or challenging for the administration. Trump has proclaimed an intention or a desire to do away with the Department of Education in full, and it's not clear under the law whether he can do that without congressional approval on the subject. It's a fascinating thing too because this kind of cuts across political lines. If you look at the Department of Education, its conception or its sort of current structure was under President Carter, a Democrat. Then it was much maligned under President Reagan as being bloated. But then President Bush, with the No Child Left Behind methodology, which was amended and presumably improved under Obama, was a champion of it. So both Republicans and Democrats have looked at the Department of Education as having a value and an import. And seemingly the goal at this point is to do away with it in full, which would cut across both parties' lines in terms of the bipartisan support for that organization.
Yeah, a lot of things to look at. We talked about the economics, we talked about business, we talked about going to court, but I do want to go back to employers for a moment because if employers do take these risks, because if you're dealing with undocumented. The reality is every employee that has an undocumented under their roof right now is at risk. And
That's
some of
right.
the risk that's included, fines up to $3,000 per worker, 6 months in jail, and then also payments that are made off the books could now result in tax evasion charges. And of course, we know that ICE raids continue at a record pace. And so for an employer that's out there, you got to worry about bringing people through the door. But now you also have to worry about whether or not immigration is coming through the door as a result of all that's going on. So it's not really a good season for employers as well as for employees too.
Yeah, I think that's right. And obviously, when it comes to legislation of this stripe, right, it's always going to be more adversely impactful for the smaller businesses, right? Because the bigger businesses, they've got the lawyers, they've got the lawyers, they've got the reserves, they've got the opportunities to just redirect or reassign or restructure in ways that can address things. But if you're a small business in construction, if you're a small restaurant, which are wonderful businesses for the city of New York, you can very much be paralyzed by this. It's hard to know what to do tomorrow. It's even much harder to know what to do 3 months from now when you don't know if you're going to have your staff, you don't know if you're going to have your team, and you don't know what that team's going to look like. And so I don't see it as anything other than a restraint on the ability of businesses to succeed, which is just not great for the city of New York, which is still, I would argue, at least rebounding from the COVID.
Yeah, a lot to unpack. Patrick J. Boyd, who's the founding partner of the Boyd Law Group, my brother, it's always good to have you and to share in
Always
the
a pleasure.
Great to have you in the conversation. Of course, you'll be back with us to break some more stuff down real soon. But thanks for being with us, Patrick Boyd.
Thank you so much.
All righty. We are taking a quick break. We'll be back with more coming up. This.